Hey everyone, Heero here, and today we're gonna have an early access look at Evelyn, Miss Yao's bodyguard and an on-field fire DPS that relies on combos and chain attacks to deal big PP damage. I'll be discussing her kit, builds, engines, and possible themes. Just as a quick disclaimer though, the footage and information that will be shown is from the Creator Experience server, so things can still change when her banner drops. Let's start by discussing Burning Embers and Burning Tethers, since her core gameplay centers around these two meters. Burning Embers are generated by hitting enemies with any of Evelyn's attacks or abilities and is indicated by the left portion of the meter. And when you have at least 50% of the bar filled, you can launch a garrote attack by holding the skill or attack button. This is a two-part attack that consumes 50% of the bar for each part. So if you want to use both parts, you need to have the bar completely filled. Using each part of this attack also grants one Burning Tether, indicated by the arrows on the right side of the meter. And when you filled up the meter with 3 Burning Tether points, it allows Evelyn to launch a chain attack on command. But these chain attacks are her main source of damage, so you generally want to play around building Burning Tethers and Embers as fast as possible in order to spam them. This makes Evelyn a DPS that appreciates a lot of field time to not only build her meters, but to also deal damage with her combos and chain attacks. So she appreciates supports or stunners that don't take too much field time for their rotations. But moving on to her specials, it has 2 versions depending on if she's in the Binding Seal state or not. If she isn't in the Binding Seal state, Evelyn will launch a regular version of her specials, which allows her to enter the state. This is indicated by an orange wire attached to an enemy. And during this state, Evelyn can use her EX specials and an enhanced version of her normal special attacks. These 2 attacks generally follow the same mechanics with a few differences. The EX special is not only stronger and generates more Burning Embers, it also has enemy grouping while her enhanced specials do not. But the more important thing about these 2 skills is that if timed correctly, it allows Evelyn to do a perfect dodge counter. And you want to use her skills to dodge instead of her normal perfect dodges, since it regens an extra 25% of the Burning Ember bar while her normal perfect dodges do not. As for her ult, it's a huge fire nuke that does a lot of damage, but it also does 2 important things. First is that it regens 1 Burning Tether point, and second, it puts her in the Dance of Fire Awakened state for the rest of the battle, which refunds 1 Burning Tether after consuming them to launch her chain attacks. After the start of combat, it is very important that you use this ability as soon as you get it. This is because it makes it easier to play her by making getting 3 Burning Tethers a lot faster, making her rotation shorter and more efficient. TLDR with the state, you only need to generate 2 Burning Tethers instead of 3. But if all of this is a bit too complicated, here's a TLDR on how to play Evelyn. Step 1. Build Burning Embers by comboing various abilities to deal damage or dodging with her special attacks. Step 2. Once you have at least 50% Burning Embers, hold the basic attack or special attack button to launch a garrote attack and generate Burning Tethers. Step 3. Keep comboing abilities and garrote attacks till you reach 3 Burning Tethers. Step 4. Once you reach the required amount of Burning Tethers, hold the basic or special attack button to launch a chain attack. And finally, step 5. Repeat everything. Oh, and bonus step, remember to use her ult whenever it becomes available. As for her core skill, let's start with her additional ability, which needs a stun or support unit to activate. First, it buffs her chain attack and ult damage by 30%, and if her crit rate reaches 80%, it increases her ults and chain attacks multipliers by 125%. It's very important that you reach 80% crit rate for the multiplier increase. Otherwise, her damage output drops significantly due to you losing out on a really big buff. Luckily, it's not too difficult to achieve this since she does have a lot of crit rate sources. But I'll go more in depth about that later in the video. As for her core passive, after entering the Binding Seal state, it gives her a 25% crit rate buff, and when switching out with the state active, she launches an enhanced special attack. This ability combined with her kit's bonus stats gives her 44.2% crit rate without substats, which puts her about halfway to her 80% crit rate goal. But for ability priority, level up her core skill first, then her chain attacks, then her basics and specials, then assist, and finally dodge. But you can just ignore her dodge since you'd want to be dodging using her special attacks anyway. But with her kit out of the way, let's talk about her Mindscapes. Her M1 gives her 1500 decibels at the start of combat and inflicts the bound debuff to an enemy connected to her during the Binding Seal state. This debuff enables her to ignore 12% of the enemy's defense, and when using her special attacks, it also spreads the debuff to other enemies. This is such a big quality of life bonus since it lets her take advantage of her ult's Dance of Fire Awakened state way sooner at the start of combat, resulting in more chain attacks for the battle. It's also worth mentioning that its Def Ignore stacks with pen ratio sources like a slot 5 main stat or Arena. Her Time 2 increases her chain attack's anti-interrupt level and buffs her attack by 15%. And every 25 seconds, it allows her garrote attacks to refund the burning embers they consume. This refund essentially allows her to execute one chain attack with just one full bar of burning embers, regardless if she's in the Dance of Fire Awakened state or not. While her M4, after using her ult or chain attacks, it gives her a shield scaling off 10% of her max HP. And while you have the shield, it also increases her crit damage by 40%. Not only does it provide more comfort by increasing her durability, but its crit damage buff is also very comparable to a slot 4 crit damage main stat. And finally, her M6 gives her the Shadow String Edge buff after using her ult or chain attack. This enables her to do an AoE follow-up every time she hits an enemy, triggering up to 16 times with the count being refreshed by using an ult or chain attack. And with her Mindscapes out of the way, let's talk about her possible Wenjins. Evelyn's signature Wenjin, Heartstring Nocturne, gives her 24% crit rate with its main stat and a 50% crit damage bonus with its passive. And after entering battle or using her ult or chain attack, it gives her the Heartstring buff, letting her ignore 12.5 enemy fire res, stacking up to 25% with a 2-stack cap. With its multitude of offensive buffs, of course it allows her to deal massive damage. But the more important part is the 24% crit rate, which puts her at 68% crit rate with no substats, which of course makes getting to 80% crit rate way easier. With that being said though, since she's an attack agent, she has plenty of alternatives, Brimstone being a good 5-star option. At max stacks of its passive, including its main stat, she can get up to a bonus 58% attack from this Wenjin alone. And it's not that hard to get max stacks since her combos uses a lot of basic attacks. But the only downside to this Wenjin is that it does not give crit rate. Aside from this, other 5-star crit Wenjins like Harumasa's, Zuyuen's, or Ellen's can work as good stat sticks. But she does have a lot of good 4-star options, with the free-to-play 4-star Mercato Desire being her best free-to-play 4-star. So hopefully you got it from patch 1.4's event. First of all, it gives her 20% crit rate, which is pretty good. But if you already have enough crit rate from her drive discs alone, there might be better options. Aside from this, it also gives her a 9.6% attack buff when hitting an enemy with a chain attack, which increases to 19.2 if you hit an enemy with an attribute anomaly. Though you only really get 9.6% attack reliably since keeping burning or anomaly uptime on her comps can be a bit difficult. Starlight Engine of course is another great free-to-play option for lots of attack. At R5, it can give her up to a 44.2% attack just by launching a dodge counter or quick assist, which isn't too hard to do. I would actually recommend this engine over Mercato if you already have enough crit rate from her drive discs alone, because its high attack bonus allows Evelyn to do a lot of damage. The BP's Cannon Rotor is also another good option. The same with Mercato, it also gives a 20% crit rate buff. Aside from this, it also gives a 7.5 to 12% attack buff depending on its refinement level. And its bonus damage procs from crit hits also allows her to squeeze in a bit more damage in her rotations. But with possible Wenjins out of the way, let's talk about drive discs. For the 4-piece set, Woodpecker Electro is her best option, with Evelyn of course benefiting a lot from its bonus 8% crit rate, which puts her at 52.2% crit rate when combined with her passive and base stats. And it also provides up to a 27% attack boost, provided you hit an enemy with a crit from a dodge counter, basic attack, or EX special, which isn't really too hard with Evelyn. Hormone Punk is also another option for lots of bonus attack. It can give her up to a 35% attack buff just by having her switch in from the backline. This set does have a 12-second downtime with its attack buff, so it's kinda difficult since you have to play around its buff uptime by making sure to time her rotations. Buffer Electro is also another option, giving her 8% bonus pen ratio and a 20% ult damage buff. It also buffs her attack by 15% for 12 seconds after using her ult. This set is really good for buffing her ult damage, but the only downside is that it doesn't really do much for her chain attacks, since its attack buff is only available for 12 seconds after ulting, meaning it won't have much uptime. And for those wondering about Inferno Metal, well, it does give her 28% crit rate when hitting burning enemies. However, there are a few problems with running this set. First, due to Evelyn getting a lot of crit rate from her kit, possible Wenjins, and even substats, it is very possible to overcap with crit rate with this set, meaning its set bonus can end up getting wasted. Second, it can give inconsistent results if you can't reliably keep burn uptime, which is the case for some of her comps. Personally, I don't really recommend this set, but I suggest testing things out on your own to see what works for you. As for the 2-piece set, well, you have a lot of choices. If you're not using it for the 4-piece set, Woodpecker would generally be the best one since it gives bonus crit rate. But aside from this, 2-piece attack, 2-piece fire, 2-piece pen ratio, and 2-piece crit damage can all work for good damage. So just use whichever has the best substats. But with our possible drive discs out of the way, let's talk about stats. For main stats, you want crit stats for slot 4, fire, pen, or attack for slot 5, and attack percent for slot 6. For the slot 4 main stat, use crit rate if you're having trouble getting crit rate from her substats, but if not, just use crit damage. As for the slot 5 main stat, it honestly depends on the team and setup you're running. If you're running her with lighter and other sources of fire damage bonuses, an attack percent main stat would be better. This is because lighter provides such a big fire damage buff that the stat becomes too diluted. If you're running her with an attack buffer that provides tons of attack like Caesar or Miss Yao and several other attack sources, a fire damage bonus would be better since attack percent would be the diluted stat in this case. And finally, pen is a good option if you're running both lighter and a massive attack buffer like Astra Yao together with other attack sources. This is because running these two causes both fire bonus and attack percent stats to start giving diminishing returns if you get too much. Meaning, pen is the only undiluted stat, so it's really good in this case. As for substats, you mainly want to focus on crit rate first, then crit damage, then attack percent, then finally flat pen or attack. Like I said earlier, she does need 80% crit rate to get her bonus 125% multiplier buff to her chain attacks and ult. So let's go over how much crit rate she can get without substats. Her core passive and base stats alone puts her at 44.2% crit rate. This becomes 52.2% if you're running Woodpecker Electro as the 2 or 4-piece set. And if you decide to run a 20% crit rate Wenjin, it gets boosted to 72.2% with no substats. Meaning you only really need 8% from substats alone. And for those running her signature, it puts her at 76.2%. So in this case, you only really need to get 4% from substats. Now, if you don't have a crit rate Wenjin or signature, you can always just run a crit rate main stat and it achieves the same results. But here's a chart showing how much crit rate substat rolls you'll need with some of her setups. So depending on what you plan to run, you can go from needing a lot of crit rate rolls to absolutely needing none from her substats. Which of course is pretty neat because it allows you to focus more on other offensive stats. With her stats out of the way, let's talk about possible teammates. The best stunner you can run with her right now is the Hot Lighter. Not only do they activate each other's bonus abilities, but he also provides her with a massive fire damage buff while simultaneously lowering fire res by a significant amount, skyrocketing her damage. And the neat thing is, he also stuns enemies super fast while also extending stun durations. Meaning he doesn't eat up too much of Evelyn's field time and also allows her to take advantage of longer stun durations. And fun fact, since Evelyn chain attacks a lot, she can refresh Lighter's fire damage buff on command, so if you wanted to, you can have full uptime of his buffs without even having to switch back to him. But if you don't have Lighter, Holeda is another good option. Her rotations are pretty short and she stuns pretty fast, so she doesn't eat up too much field time from Evelyn. But the cool thing is, she also increases chain attack damage by up to 70% during stun windows, given that you hit the enemy twice with her EX specials. Qingyi can work as well. She provides a massive stun damage multiplier buff with her kit, which of course helps Evelyn deal more damage. However, the problem with Qingyi is she takes up a considerable amount of field time, which of course isn't too ideal because she ends up competing with Evelyn for field time. So if you're not careful, it could result in some awkward rotations wherein Evelyn doesn't get as much chain attacks during stun windows. Though you can somewhat solve this problem by either switching between them periodically before stunning or timing stuns so that enemies are stunned when Evelyn at least has 2 burning tethers. But if you don't have any of them, Anbi can work as a budget stunner for beginner teams. And just like Qingyi, she also takes up a lot of field time from Evelyn, which can end up getting even longer since she doesn't have many iframes, so getting hit can extend her rotations. It's also worth mentioning that we're also getting 2 new stunners next update, with Bernice's cat and Trigger being released. But since we don't have any official info yet, I'll refrain from talking too much about them. As her supports, her current best one is her wife, the astronomical Astra Yao. She enables Evelyn to do massive damage by not only providing a damage and crit damage buff on top of giving a massive 1000 bonus attack, but by also providing more chain attack procs and heals with her ult. She also allows her more seamless transitions between Evelyn and supports with her quick assist mechanic, with said mechanic also generating a decent amount of burning embers for Evelyn. And the icing on top of the cake is, she literally has 0 field time. meaning Evelyn ends up getting more field time because she has one less teammate to compete with. Caesar is also another good support to run with her. She gives her shields for more comfy gameplay, a massive attack buff, and damage taken debuff to enemies allowing for more damage, all on top of acting as a pseudo stunner and increasing days with her ult, providing occasional stuns for high bursts of damage. And of course, her rotations are also really short, which is pretty good for Evelyn. Though, just note, she doesn't activate Evelyn's additional ability. But if you don't have Astra Yao or Caesar, Lucy is a really good alternative, with Lucy technically being a free unit that gives a good attack buff. And as a bonus, her rotations are also super short, and she also gives bonus crit damage if you have her M4. Nicole is also another really good option to use for both beginner and old players alike. Not only does she provide a huge defense shred, but she also provides a 15% crit rate buff if you have her M6, which enables tons of damage for Evelyn, while also helping her reach her 80% crit rate goal a lot easier. This is all on top of her field time basically being non-existent, which allows Evelyn to stay in field more often. And if you're wondering if she can work with Rina since she is a support, well, kinda. Evelyn appreciates her pen ratio buffs since she already gets lots of attack from many sources. But the problem with Rina is that her buffs are way too short, and having to switch into her to constantly refresh them leads to awkward rotations, especially during stuns. So in my personal opinion, I personally don't recommend using Rina with Evelyn unless you have Rina's M1, which basically solves this problem. With her possible teammates out of the way, let's cook up some teams. Now, before we cook up some teams, just note you need at least one of the characters shown in screen to activate her additional ability. And as usual, just pick a bang boo that would suit the party. But with that being said, there are two comps you can run with Evelyn. The first is a standard hyper carry comp with a support and stunner of your choice, so just use whoever you have. However, the best variation of this comp is one with Evelyn, Lighter, and Astra Yao, with the Bang Boo either being the Rocket Boo or Snap. In my opinion, this is one of the best comps currently in the game due to how much damage Evelyn ends up doing with this team. This is because of all the offensive buff this team funnels into Evelyn combined with Lighter's Fire Rush Shred. And because of Astra Yao not having any field time and Lighter being able to stun fast and extend stun durations, Evelyn is able to take a lot of field time in this comp to deal damage, with her being able to take advantage of frequent stuns to not only launch more chain attacks, but to also deal more damage in her rotations. This team is generally played with Evelyn being on-field most of the time to build her meters, with you only switching to Lighter to stun the enemy when you have enough of her meters filled to allow her to launch lots of chain attacks during the stun window. Though if you're having trouble balancing between when to stun with Lighter or your stunners and when to on-field Evelyn, a good rule that I personally follow is I try to time my stuns to when I have at least enough burning tethers to launch one chain attack right after the initial stun chain attack. This allows you to launch at least 2 to 3 chain attacks during the stun window, 2 at the beginning, with you using Evelyn's combos to build up for a third in the end. The neat thing is, due to all the supportive buffs and Lighter's Rush Shred being active without even stunning the enemy, Evelyn will still deal pretty big damage. So not having stuns while building her meters doesn't really cause a big damage drop-off. But due to all the damage Evelyn deals in this comp, it can basically clear just about any endgame content, being able to perform quick shield defense clears and achieve high scores and deadly assault with ease. The second type of comp you can run is a double support comp with 2 of any of the supports I mentioned in the synergy section. So again, just use whoever you have. However, in my opinion, I believe the best variation of this comp is one with Evelyn, Astra Yao, and Nicole. If you're worried about your damage output in this comp due to the lack of stunners, well, don't be. Because unlike other attack units like Harumasa or Zhu Yuen, her dealing good damage isn't limited to stun windows. This is due to the buffs from the team and her high damage multipliers enabling massive damage, and her nature of wanting as much field time as possible to build her meters for chain attacks. And this comp pretty much gives her just that, a lot of field time, to the point that 90% of the battle is just gonna be Evelyn on field spamming her abilities to get chain attacks, making this comp relatively simple to play. And you don't really have to worry about Nicole's defense shred only lasting 8 seconds, since it's really easy to refresh anyway, especially with Astra Yao's quick assist mechanic. And if you're wondering why use Nicole instead of someone like Caesar or Lucy, who have longer buff durations, well, it's because running Miss Yao with another attack buffer causes Evelyn's attack stat to become so diluted, it starts to give diminishing returns. So in this case, it's much better to run a support that provides supportive benefits that aren't already in abundance, making Nicole a perfect choice. But if you still want to run Caesar for her occasional stuns, I'd recommend replacing Astra Yao on this comp. Rina can also work as a replacement for Nicole due to pen ratio buffs. But again, I'd only recommend using her for this comp once you have her E1. But yes, any variation of the double support team can clear just about any endgame content like Deadly Assault, or harder shield defense stages with ease despite being simple to play. But that's about it because I'm beginning to lose my voice. But there's just one last question. Is she a must pull? Well, as usual, it depends on your account. She's not really a must pull if you already have multiple top tier DPSs like Miyabi or Jane and are satisfied in their performance and clearing content. In this case, it's much better to roll for someone that would benefit your account more, like Astra Yao, one of the best universal supports whose banner is still active by the time this video goes up. However, Evelyn is definitely a must pull if you're needing a good DPS. She is a very fun and unique unit that's relatively simple to play once you understand her kit, but that simplicity doesn't hold her back. She deals amazing damage with chain attacks and combos. Another neat thing is, team building for her is rather simple and flexible. You can pair her with any combos of supports or stunners and she'll be able to clear content just fine, making her a good option for both beginner and veteran players alike. Now, I can't guarantee her future value since we don't know how much power creep will affect this game yet, but in my own humble opinion, she will get even stronger once more supports or stunners that can better support her on-field playstyle come out. At the end of the day though, if you like Evelyn, pull for her, and if you don't, well, don't. Personally, I'm gonna be pulling for her because she's pretty cool and I find the way she fights pretty darn badass.
Oh my god, she's so goddamn cool!
But make sure to tell me what you think about her in the comment section below and don't forget to hit me with a like and a sub.